1983, East Berlin. I play 3 chords and shout into a cheap microphone. Somewhere in the crowd, my audience takes notes for the state. He writes it on a folded page, a sentence that could not be spoken but could be hidden. It is a thesis, noise as truth, surveillance as accompaniment. It is where this story ends and where its arithmetic begins. May 8, 1945. Berlin. The war ends in rubble and smoke. The Reich falls. A boy named Karl counts missing people on a street. His father has not returned from the east. His mother ties a scarf to keep the dust out of her mouth and joins a line of women at a bombed-out corner by Bernauer Strasse. They pick bricks from a heap that used to be a pharmacy. They pass them hand to hand like bread. They are called Trümmerfrauen in later photographs. Now they are simply neighbors with sore backs and cold hands. The mathematics of rubble is simple, ton upon ton. Berlin alone generates an estimated 60 million cubic meters of ruins. The women and boys sort what they can. A good brick can be cleaned with a hammer and used again. 5 bricks per minute for hands that do not bleed. A truck carries 1,000. It is measurable and thus survivable. Occupation reports read flat. Order restored in sector. Curfew enforced, 2,000 hours to 0600 hours. Rations distributed limited. In homes, the arithmetic is different. Ovens cold, windows patched with paper. A child counts rooms. 3 families in 2 rooms. Karl sleeps on a floor he shares with his cousin, who coughs at night. A kettle boils rainwater. Crows pick at the corners of the garden. The Soviet military administration issues orders in Russian and German: surrender weapons, register party membership, return stolen property. Posters announce cultural evenings. People look at the posters, then at their shoes. On May 2nd, Soviet tanks roll down Unter den Linden. There are stories about what soldiers do. Some are true, some are rumor, most are fear. Karl's mother does not tell him the details. She stops going out after dusk. She wears her wedding band on a string around her neck and hides her last silver spoon in a sack of turnips. From a neighbor's attic, Karl watches Red Army soldiers take a painting off a wall and roll it into a tube. In a church basement, a man from the old city office burns files. The machinery of a new order begins with paper. German civilians are given forms, names, date of birth, residence. From 1933 to 1945, list all memberships and offices. Were you a member of the NSDAP? SA? SS? Hitler Youth? Were you employed by the state? Remember that failure to declare is punishable. Sign, date, fingerprint. The forms are called Fragebogen. They will proliferate. In the West, where American Jeeps idle, denazification courts. 5 categories: Hauptschuldig, belastet, minder belastet, Mitlaufer, entlastet, major offenders, offenders, lesser offenders, followers, exonerated. The categories are moral mathematics made administrative. The files become numbers, the numbers become policy, the policy become policy. The policy becomes memory. Karl is in the East. He is 16 and thin. He fills a different set of forms for the police in his district. The Soviet military administration in Germany, SMAD, sets up internment camps for Nazis and war criminals. A teacher from Karl's school is taken. He is not seen again. Land reform begins in the countryside. The largest farms are broken up. Junkerland in Bauernhand. The slogan sounds righteous and loud. It is also a transfer of power, supervised by an army that lost 20 million dead. In September 1945, Allied intelligence summaries note the mood. Defeatism, fatigue, hard to restore work discipline. The curfew is observed. The Soviet commandant's office offers tickets to the first post-war theater. Brecht will return later. Others leave. Karl watches lines form at a soup kitchen run by a church. He gets a ladle of soup like water, a piece of bread that must last 2 days. The arithmetic of hunger is precise. The human body requires 2,000 calories to stand and work. Rations in winter 1946-47 dip as low as 1,000 a day. A lump of coal buys an evening's warmth. A cigarette buys an egg. Cigarettes circulate as a parallel currency. The black market fills the gaps between official words. An occupation report from the British zone describes it. The black market exists as an economic rival to the state. Cigarettes, coffee, butter, stockings, the currency of necessity. Officially, trading is illegal. Unofficially, officers look away. The Americans bring care packages in 1946, tins of Spam, dried milk, chocolate bars. A package arrives at a church office, addressed to no one in particular. Karl's mother receives a can of meat and cries into the lid. In a train yard in Brandenburg, Karl hears about homecomings. Men thin as ropes, their cheeks hollow under their eyes, step down with sacks and stand on uneven gravel. Others do not return. A woman receives a letter from the Wehrmacht archives, a brittle document with a stamp notifying her that her husband is vermissed, presumed dead. The word is an arithmetic of absence. It cannot be reversed. Displaced persons live in camps on the edges of German towns. Jews from Poland and Hungary. Forced laborers from Ukraine and Belarus. Prisoners of war. People who do not want to go back and cannot move forward. A Soviet officer drives a truck to one camp, points, and orders men to climb in. Repatriation. Some jump off again when the truck slows. In Allied records, the phrase is neutral. On the ground, it is bruises, screams, a fence. Karl passes a fence on a road near Oranienburg. Behind the barbed wire is a different regime. Sachsenhausen, a Nazi concentration camp, becomes a Soviet special camp. 7,000 die there after the war of cold, hunger, disease. 24 kilometers away, a bakery opens with a line out the door. The contrast is a ledger that is rarely read aloud. The arithmetic of suffering is not exclusive to one column. West of Karl, in Göttingen and Kassel and Cologne, refugees arrive by the thousands. Germans expelled from the east. Silesia, Pomerania, East Prussia. Women with children and bundles. Men with empty sleeves. Trains called Betzke, bed trains, carry them to towns that already have no beds. The mathematics of displacement is a flood. Between 12 and 14 million people cross borders because borders are moved. In a Bavarian town, a mayor writes, "Everything is scarce: food, fuel, space, patience." Bundesarchiv records preserve the minute. 3 families in one flat. Refuse disputes. Unmixed dialects. Locals call them Fluchtlinge and blame them when prices shift. Newcomers call locals Die Satten, the satiated, even when they are not. In a letter saved in an oral history collection, a woman from Breslau writes, "We do not ask for pity, only for a corner to put our hay mattress and a nail for our coat. The corner is given, grudgingly. The nail falls out of the cracked plaster. The coat lands in dust. Denazification moves from principle to practice. The mathematics of guilt turns pragmatic. In the American zone, 3.5 million people fill out questionnaires. The Sprüchkammern issue decisions. Most are Mitläufer or Entlastet. Some men lose jobs. Some go to prison. Others return after a year or two, their files stamped with a category and a fine. In the British zone, a narrower focus. In the French, stricter on paper, inconsistent in application. In the Soviet zone, a swift purge of elites, then a new elite. A party calls itself Socialist Unity and registers names. It builds cadres from workers and anti-fascists. It also offers quiet returns to those who can recite the right slogans. The arithmetic of guilt is not only a ledger, it is a memory system. A man who once wrote Siege Heil on a form now writes, I was never political. A teacher who taught racial hygiene now lectures on Marx. An engineer who ran a factory for the Reich builds one for the Republic. People adjust their self-descriptions to survive. Occupation files are full of known pasts and declared pasts that are not the same. A Spruchkammer judge writes in a report, we need stability more than thorough justice. The state is being built on a floor that still shakes. Karl leaves school and takes a job sorting bricks. Then, as an apprentice in a city office, he learns to type forms with carbon paper. He learns to file. He learns the new abbreviations, SED, FDJ, FDGB. He attends an evening class to become a new lehrer's assistant, teaching younger pupils in a school without enough chairs. In the East, a new narrative is printed in school books. It is the anti-fascist story. The Nazis were capitalists and militarists. The workers were their victims and resistors. The Soviet army liberated Germany from fascism. The new state embodies that liberation. The story is clean. It makes the past into a function with clear inputs and outputs. By 1947, hunger's arithmetic peaks. The winter is cold. The potatoes rot in the ground. Coal is scarce. People eat turnips for weeks. The British Control Commission reports note, unrest caused by ration cuts. In the American zone, an anonymous informant tells an intelligence officer, we are hungry and tired of being told to be thankful. Food is numbers. So is currency. June 20, 1948, the Western zones introduce a new Deutsche Mark. Old Reichsmarks are exchanged. The black market collapses overnight. The same day, shop windows fill with goods that had been hoarded in warehouses. The arithmetic of trust shifts. Prices stabilize. Farmers bring produce to market. The Americans call it reform. The Soviets call it theft. In Berlin, a city with 4 sectors, 2 currencies, and 1 war's worth of trauma, the mathematics becomes a blockade. June 24, 1948. The Soviet military cuts roads and rails to West Berlin. The air corridors remain. The American and British air forces fly in supplies. The Berlin airlift is a logistics problem solved with numbers. Flights every 3 minutes. Coal in sacks. Flour by the ton. A pilot named Halvorsen drops candy attached to handkerchief parachutes. Children call him Onkel Wackelflugel. Dry Allied prose says, average daily tonnage 4,700. For people on the ground, it is breath. For Karl, who lives in the east and watches planes descend over Tempelhof, it is a miracle he is told to call a provocation. In 1949, 2 states are announced. The Federal Republic of Germany in Bonn. The German Democratic Republic in Berlin. The border is lines on maps and lines in routines. Karl's sister marries a man from the west and moves to Hanover. Karl stays in the east. He has a job, a ration card, a sense of being observed. He also has a hope that the next week will be slightly easier than the last. 1953. June 17. Workers in East Berlin strike. Construction wages are cut, work norm. They march with signs that read, Wir fordern freie Wahlen. We demand free elections. The Soviet tanks roll again. People die. The government blames fascist provocateurs. The newspapers print the required paragraphs. In Karl's office, a quiet falls. A colleague who spoke too loudly at lunch is no longer at his desk. A file appears on Karl's review stack about deviationist tendencies. He initialed the wrong memo. He learns to initial less. He learns to look at the floor again. In the West, the arithmetic begins to improve. The Wirtschaftswunder, the miracle of work. The Marshall Plan is not a miracle, it is an investment. Dollars translate into machine tools and rail cars. American wheat fills German bakeries. Ludwig Erhard drafts policies that mix market and social insurance. Factories with names like Siemens and BASF home again. People move to cities. They buy radios, then washing machines, then small cars called Beetles. Consumption becomes a language of normality. Karl visits his sister in 1957 through a hole in a border that still can be crossed. He sees supermarkets with mountains of fruit. He touches a packet of coffee, releases it quickly as if it might be a trick. He reads a newspaper that prints letters arguing with the government openly. He returns to the East with a headache and a pack of contraband chewing gum. School books in the West change slowly. They tell a national story with gaps. Text and ceremony focus on the firestorms from the sky. Photos of Dresden and Hamburg burn into memory. A memorial in a small town lists the men who died with no mention of the men who killed. There are sermons about sorrow. There are fewer about guilt. Public commemorations are math with weighted coefficients. Some things count more than others. In the East, the anti-fascist story is repeated in stadiums and in textbooks. Groups of anti-fascists reenact the storming of a prison. Nie wieder Faschismus. Never again fascism. There are plaques outside factories naming murdered communists. There are fewer markers for murdered Jews until much later. The state's memory has a purpose. It consolidates loyalty. It also quiets questions about who staffed which office in 1949, after leaving which office in 1944. 1961. August 13. The border between East and West Berlin closes. A wall rises. Barbed wire first. Then concrete slabs towers a strip of sand. The GDR calls it the Antifaschistische Schutzwall, the anti-fascist protective wall. The West calls it the wall. Families are divided by night. Karl wakes to a city with a new geometry. He goes to work because that is what he does. He writes a letter to his sister he cannot send, then writes a postcard he can with news about the weather. Files in ministries thicken. The Ministry for State Security is a bureaucracy with rooms that smell of stale tobacco and carbon paper. The Stasi recruits informants and files reports. There is no war outside. Inside there is paperwork. Every conversation is a file in potential. The mathematics of fear is redundant. It counts everything twice. MFS file headings divide life. Operational case, observation, disciplinary hearing, forges of clerks. By 1968 in the West, students march to demand a different story. They ask their professors what they did in 1933. They ask their parents what they saw in 1942. They occupy lecture halls. They read Adorno aloud, then throw rocks at police. The word Auschwitz has begun to be spoken clearly and often. It is a wound that reopens. For some, it is a new confession. For many, it is too late. In the East, the students march for peace, then fall silent when Warsaw Pact tanks enter Prague. They hear about the Prague Spring on Western radio. They hear the word solidarity from Poland in 1980. They read unofficial papers printed on smuggled mimeographs. The church offers rooms. The state sends note-takers to those rooms. The vocabulary of control includes Zersetzung, corrosion, decomposition, psychological techniques to break opposition. The documents on this are technical. Replace typewriter ribbons, rotate mail carriers, spread rumors at a workplace. Move a person's furniture by an inch to disorient him. The file reads, banal, then cruel. Karl's son is born in 1965. He is named Matthias because his grandmother liked the sound. He grows up with a father who keeps ledgers and a mother who keeps butter in the cellar. He lives near where Bernauer Strasse once had an open sky. He goes to school. He joins the pioneer group because all children do. He learns to sing songs about friendship, then listens at night to music that comes from west of the wall. Punk arrives in East Berlin like a cough. It is contagious and not easily contained. 3 chords are enough to start a riot in a mind. Oral histories capture the quiet of living through quiet violence. A man in Hamburg writes, "We did not ask our father enough." A woman in Dresden says, "My mother said it was better not to know." Occupation reports from 1947 become a footnote. The Stasi reports from 1983 become a surface again. The continuity is not ideological. It is procedural. Forms, names, stamps, lists. Karl is promoted to a position that requires uniform sentences. His desk is neat. He has 3 pencils lined up and a blotter cut from an old calendar. He approves repairs to stairwells. He signs requisitions for roofing tar. He allocates space, apartment, office, storage. He is good at arithmetic and careful not to complain. He knows how many have their own keys. He knows, more importantly, who lets whose friends in. He considers himself honest because he does not steal. He considers himself prudent because he will not write what he thinks. He is exactly what the new democracy needs and cannot admit it needs, someone who will compromise with paperwork so that the shelves do not fall. He remembers 1945. He forgets 1945. He carries both. Across the street from his building, a visible, temporary, illegal stage arises on a Saturday in June 1983. It is attached to a church because that is where such stages can exist. The poster is hand-lettered and says, "Jugend ohne Gott," youth without God, a joke and a dare. Matthias tunes a guitar. He is thinner than his father was at his age and better fed. He wears a jacket with studs his mother pretends not to see. His boots thud. He knows 3 chords. He is enough. He writes, in a notebook, a sentence that cannot be said under the sky. 1983, Ostberlin. Ich spiele 3 Akkorde und schreie in ein billiges Mikrofon. Irgendwo im Publikum nimmt mein Publikum für den Staat Notizen. He writes it to remind himself that courage is math. 3 chords plus 1 mouth. Add a room of eyes. Subtract safety. The result is a self. In an office on Normannenstrasse, an officer in Hauptabteilung XX7 files his own report. Youth subculture. Church circles. Concert observed by I.M. Fink. 20 persons present. Slogans critical of state heard. Names MZ, AKHR, no arrests. Operative measure Zersetzung Phase 1. Create conflicts within group via rumor regarding singer's girlfriend. Sabotage amplifier. The language is cold. The goal is drying up the spring before it becomes a river. The files also hold older numbers. At the Bundesarchiv in Koblenz, denazification files rest in boxes. Cards with categories. Names with tick marks. Spruchkammer decisions. Mustent stamp. The past is archived and thus manageable. In the Stasi records, the present is archived in attempt. The 2 archives are cousins. Their aim is different. Their method, a belief that paper and control can keep chaos out, is the same. The vigilance is a kind of religion. Contact with victims was always near. In the late 1940s, on the edge of every German town, a camp, Bergen-Belsen, not as a killing center now, but as a place where survivors live for years. Landsberg am Lech, full of Yiddish songs and American uniforms and babies called DP babies. Allied reports say, approx. 1,000 births in DP camps in 1947. German neighbors see men with numbers on their arms, women with scarves, children with nightmares. Some bring food, some turn away. Some collect items at the fence like words picked up and set down. What happened there? What could we have done? A former neighbor writes in a notebook, I did not know. I think I knew. I knew a little. The mathematics of denial is flexible. It can be stretched and shrunk like rubber. In the West, the state starts to talk differently. Not in 1949, not in 1955, later. Television miniseries draw curtains back. One night in January 1979, a program called Holocaust airs. It is American and melodramatic. It makes something visible that was always visible. Callers jam the lines. Editorials shift tone. Teachers rewrite lesson plans. Memorial days are announced. Plaques say, "Nye wieder." Ceremonies name the murdered. The language of the state begins to call perpetrators by more precise pronouns. We. In the East, the official story remains fixed. Nazis were fascists. Fascists were capitalists. We are anti-fascists. But artists speak around it. A novel says in its silence what can't be printed. A pastor holds prayers for peace that include prayers for truth. A choir sings a funeral song for a past never buried. The Stasi takes notes. Karl does not go to his son's show. He waits at home. He reads a local paper with articles about harvest yields and a photograph of a smiling SED district leader handing flowers to a worker. He squares the corners of the newspaper and places it on the table. He looks at the door when the latch clicks. Matthias is flushed and bright, like a boy who has fallen into a canal and laughed. He says nothing in the hallway. He hums, off-key and loud, in the bathroom. Karl hears 3 chords through a wall where he once listened for bombs. He sits down with a pen and a blank page. There are documents for this life. Karl's original Fragebogen from 1946, filled out in pencil, exists in a file. His denazification would have been a Soviet interview instead of a Sprüchkammer, but his uncle's Sprüchkammer record in Hesse lists him as Mitläufer, fined 1 month's salary and returned to his office. A return to the desk is a recurring outcome. A police interrogation report from 1953 exists in a municipal file with lines blacked out. It notes Karl's presence at a cafe the afternoon of June 16 and concludes, "No evidence of direct involvement in agitation." An Allied intelligence summary from 1947 notes, "A blocked street near his home. Civilian population cooperative." A Stasi file from 1983, if requested years later at the Office for the Records of the State Security, would contain his son's name on a page in a corner of Karl's life in handwriting not his. The arithmetic of survival calculates the minimum to say. It is not heroic. It is common. It is what most people do when their mouths can move, but their meals can stop. In 1945, survival means barter and silence. In 1953, it means agreeing in public and muttering in kitchens. In 1961, it means not standing near the border with the wrong posture. In 1979, it means not laughing at the wrong joke. In 1983, it means not being seen at the wrong concert. The mathematics of conformity is learned early and practiced late. Across town, in a different archive, there are numbers for economic growth. West German GDP rising at 8% a year in the 1950s. Volkswagen export figures double. Housing construction at 700,000 units completed in 1950, then 500,000 more in 1951. Unemployment drops from 10.8% in 1950 to 1.3% in 1960. A chart is a story without faces. A factory is a story with faces without names. Behind every chart is a desk like Karl's, and someone. In the factories of the East, entire production lines are disassembled and loaded onto trains in 1946 as reparations to the Soviet Union. The arithmetic of reparations is pounds and tons. The loss is real. The pride remains. We build a better world with these machines, here and there. That is the official phrase. It is said in speeches and read in newspapers. It is reflected in faces that have not eaten enough fat. Carl's job in the new order is a clerk's job. He writes down who deserves what and when. He falls asleep in a chair near the window some days, a pencil in his fingers. He dreams of rooms with no walls and walls with no rooms, then wakes to a window with frost and a coat to put on. He knows that even these small comforts rest on compromises. He knows that his brother-in-law in Hanover votes in elections he can only read about. He knows that his own school books erased as much as they taught. He knows his son is louder than he ever was. He is proud and afraid. On a Friday afternoon in late autumn of 1983, a factory foreman named Gerhard writes a note to a friend, saved in an oral history archive decades later. The boys' music is noise and truer than the speeches. They should not have to shout, but they do, so they must shout. In the same week, a student in Munich writes in a diary kept in a shoebox, "We talk about 1939 like it was their project, but it will never be entirely theirs, because they built our streets and walls, and we walk on them." The contact with victims never fully leaves the edges of the country's mind. West German politicians visit Yad Vashem. East German delegations visit Warsaw. A grey-haired man returns to a village and remembers who lived in the house with the oak tree. Quietly, a plaque is installed. Quietly, people choose to pass the plaque on the opposite side of the road. The politics of memory is a choice at every corner. The arithmetic of guilt does not end. It changes variables. In the evenings, Matthias reads Soviet Samizdat in bad German translation. He listens to a West Berlin radio station on a transistor perched on the window ledge. He writes lines into a notebook. "I am not an enemy, but I am not a friend of lies." He tears the page out. He does not put it in his jacket. He uses it to light the stove. Stability needed justice and found compromise. The people in charge made those choices. So did people with less charge. Files called Tätigkeitsbericht des Bezirksblatts list denazification completed. A minister says in a public broadcast, "The past is behind us." It was not. It is not. It breathes in offices and kitchens. It stands in lines at ticket counters. It sits in a chair 13 centimeters from the radiator and remembers November 1943, the wind blowing. It is measured not in war dead, but in missing words. The last time Carl sees the inside of the church hall where his son plays, it is for a neighbor's funeral. The pastor mentions 1945 once and 1983 not at all. Outside, a bicycle leans on a railing, brakes squeaking. There is a new poster for a youth evening, discussing democracy. The letters are straight. The conversation is crooked. He returns home that night and takes out his old thin notebook. It begins in 1945. It has 12 different kinds of paper in it, because paper was scarce in 1945 and then abundant, but not always available to him. Some pages are onion skin, some are thick, some are from a calendar with red numbers for Sundays. The handwriting changes with age and with ink. His last entry is neat. The ink is blue and does not smudge. The words are economical, as if he is afraid of the state, which he is, and of pathos, which he despises. Carl M. notes, 12 November 1983. Prenzlauer Berg. In 1945, I learned the mathematics of hunger. In 1946 and 1947, I learned the arithmetic of cold. In 1948, I learned that currencies are laws. In 1949, I learned that borders are made of paper before they are made of stone. In 1953, I learned how much a word costs in June. In 1961, I learned that the wall is less a thing and more a verb. In 1979, I learned new words for old crimes. Tonight, I learned the mathematics of courage played in 3 chords. My son shouts into a microphone. He shouts what I have written and what I have not written. Somewhere in the crowd, his audience takes notes for the state. Somewhere in an office, men like me sort the notes. I have signed forms for roofs and stairwells. The war after the war taught me to live with silence. It taught me also that a country can change all its lamps and still use the same wires. I will not confess here. I will record. We stood in lines for soup and for slogans. We carried bricks. We filled in circles, yes, no, exonerated follower. We made children who make noise. In 1945, the front line moved from the maps into the rooms. It stayed there. It runs through our tables, our school books, our new jobs, our old tricks, our ration cards, and our careful sentences. It runs through my memory and my paperwork, not across a battlefield.